All right, everybody. Welcome in live from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Jarrett Bailey with you here as always. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please make sure to get that done. And yeah, big day in terms of the NFL offseason, NFL Combine beginning today. Several general managers around the NFL speaking. Omar Khan was one of the first to talk today. He talked around 10 a.m. and yeah, gave a lot of, you know, it's the typical GM stuff where he says a lot without saying a lot. There's going to be a lot of word salad answers, but a few of the answers that he did give were pretty informative and noteworthy. These are my biggest takeaways from that. The first being centered around the quarterback position, and I'll get the exact quotes pulled up for you. That way I'm not just talking out of my butt. But the first thing that I asked Omar was, in terms of the quarterback position, would you prefer to keep Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, or Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, compared to, going outside the organization for someone like, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, someone of that nature? And Omar said that he would, the standpoint of the organization is that they would rather keep one of the guys that they had last year rather than going outside the organization. He adds that they've had conversations with both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. But at this point, none of them are under contract. So he added anything is on the table right now, which is what I think everybody expected going into this, is that they are going to be very open. I asked about reports of Matthew Stafford potentially being on the radar, and he just said he's not going to comment on anybody outside the organization. He did add that there is a lot of, and I quote, fake news around the NFL. But again, he added all options are on the table right now when it comes to the quarterback position. And I know a lot of people will hear, the comment about Matthew Stafford and say, oh, they're not going to go that route then. But as the great Alan Saunders of Steelers Now pointed out a few years ago last year in this very spot, he said, hey, we've got all the confidence in the world in Kenny Pickett, and we're confident with him going into the season. And then a few weeks later, they traded him. So, again, a lot of the stuff that is said here doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what's going to happen. Doesn't mean that that's exactly what's going on behind closed doors. What is known, or at least what was told to the media, is that the Steelers would prefer to keep Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, somebody that they had in-house last year, to be their starter. But they are considering all options. And that considering all options certainly does a lot of heavy lifting when talking about, what this team could do, because obviously they went into last offseason with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky on the roster. They cut Mitch Trubisky, and then they traded Kenny Pickett and signed Russell Wilson on day one of free agency. A few days later, trade for Justin Fields. So just because they're saying one thing, very much like they did last year, doesn't mean that that is what is going to happen. The next big thing for me was a note on the offensive line. I asked Omar about Broderick Jones. Are they going to play him right tackle? Are they going to play him at left tackle? And Omar Khan said, and I quote, as we stand here right now, it is safe to assume that Broderick will start the offseason at left tackle. He did that successfully at Georgia, so we'll see how it shakes out. He also added that Mason McCormick is someone that they were very pleased with. He said, he got better every week. We're excited to have him and excited to see what the future holds for him. So if that's the case, well, let's start off with the Broderick Jones situation. The way that the Steelers have handled Broderick Jones has been something, because he came in, they drafted him as a left tackle. He played right tackle because they kept starting Dan Moore at left tackle his rookie year. And they put him in for Chuks Okorafor, and he played well at right tackle. And everybody seemed, all right, if they want to keep Broderick Jones at right tackle, that's fine, and then start Troy Fautanu at left tackle rather than start Dan Moore. Instead, what they do is they start Troy Fautanu at right tackle throughout the offseason, keep Dan Moore as starting left tackle, and they just have Broderick Jones do all this flippy-floppy stuff, and it really stunted his growth And I think it impacted the player that we saw on the field this season, which was featured a lot of inconsistencies, especially early on in the year. And it hurt any type of growth that he could have had. And a lot of that falls back on Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, who for some reason they decided to keep around and haven't moved on from. And I think that had a lot to do with why Roger Jones struggled. Not to say that he's completely without fault, but it's clear that there are things in the building that aren't being done to help his growth. So regardless of that, they are now moving him back to left tackle, which he played in college. That's what he was drafted to play. Last year, Omar Khan was asked about Roger Jones, and he said, we drafted him to be a left tackle. And then last year, of course, spent all year at right tackle. So moving Roger Jones back to left, which would mean Troy Fautanu will be the starting right tackle. And by the way he's talking, Mason McCormick will be returning as a starting right guard. So 4 out of 5 offensive linemen that will start for the Steelers in 2025 have been acquired in the last 2 drafts. Roger Jones in 2023, and then Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick in 2024. The only non-in-house drafted guy is Isaac Samalo. And especially if this turns out successful, which for a few guys it already has. Like Zach Frazier already looks like a stud. Mason McCormick did play well for the most part last year. And Troy Fautanu, we'll see. We didn't get to see a lot of him last year because of injuries. But that's a guy who a lot of people were like, yeah, this is a guy who, people would be shocked if he didn't play well. So in terms of that, the Steelers have a young offensive line that they committed to rebuilding. They got that done. And now we'll see with Broderick Jones. But again, moving him back to left tackle, that it speaks to just the mind-boggling way that they've gone about developing him. And now we're going to see how it works at left tackle, especially for whoever is behind center this coming year. Another thing that stuck out, a lot of people have asked about, all right, what's going on with George Pickens? Is there a potential trade coming there? According to Omar Khan, that doesn't seem to be something that's going to be happening. Omar Khan said, and I quote, he had a really solid exit meeting with GP, and I can tell you that he has a desire to be great. He has a desire to be great here, and we have a desire for him to be great and to be great here. So with that in mind, it looks like George Pickens will be in a Steelers uniform in 2025. And now, again, as I said to kick off the show, just because that's what they are saying doesn't mean that's what is going to happen. Again, at this time last year, Omar Khan said that the organization had full faith in Kenny Pickett, and he was traded a few weeks later. So it's not to say that a trade won't happen, but the way that Omar Khan is talking is that they aren't planning to trade George Pickens. And so with that in mind, you can kind of shift focus to, all right, well, who's going to complement him at receiver then? I asked him, about the lack of explosion offensively and how high on the totem pole receiver was. And he said, trying to get explosive at the playmaking positions is something that, you want to do as an offense. So it's something that they hope to address. And they're going to have ways to do it. There's a lot of quality free agents out there, whether it be Darius Slayton or Chris Godwin, that they could add along with drafting a guy. Mike Nicastro of Behind the Steel Curtain, one of our great writers, put out, a potential offense that could feature George Pickens, Chris Godwin, and Matthew Golden. And then you put that Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson. That is a much better receiving core than Pittsburgh had in 2024. And so you can't just mosey around with the likes of Van Jefferson and Ben Skoranek. Like, you got to get real names out there. Even when they traded for Mike Williams, they didn't do anything with him. He had the one big catch in his first game against the Commanders, and we didn't really see much of Mike Williams after that in terms of big plays, big catches. So the receiver position is something that Pittsburgh needs to address, and it's something that Omar Khan seems pretty aware of. And again, the way that he's talking says that they don't plan on moving George Pickens as of right now. But we all know things happen, and there's a long time until the regular season starts. So, this is the time of year where we start figuring out how teams feel. And again, last year they felt really good about Kenny Pickett, supposedly, and then they traded him. So, look, and if they did feel really good about Kenny Pickett, they wouldn't have brought in Russell Wilson to begin with, right? So I do think that while Omar Khan does say that about George Pickens, if somebody called with an offer that blew them away, I think that at minimum they would listen to what was being offered. And in terms of what they could get in return, I don't know what it would be, because you got to take into consideration, George Pickens not having any off-field issues per se. I mean, he had the situation in 2024 or 2023 rather, where he wiped his social media clean of all things Steelers related, and it looked like things were going south pretty quickly. A lot of on-field outbursts and whatnot. So those are things that teams are going to keep in consideration if and when they would call about potentially acquiring him. So, I mean, what are you going to get for George Pickens? A second-round pick, a third-round pick? If those were discussions that were to happen. So all things that need to be considered going into what will be an eventful offseason for the Steelers. Omar also added about the cornerback position, because I asked about Corey Trice, and I was like, when he was on the field, it looked like he was taking steps forward. And Omar Khan said, the reality is that durability has been an issue for Corey Trice. And until the durability isn't an issue, cornerback is going to be a point of priority that they need to address in the offseason. So I think that was pretty eye-opening when it comes to how they feel about Corey Trice's role going into 2025. It's a guy who they took late in the draft in 2023, suffered the torn ACL in camp, so missed out on his entire rookie year. Came back last year, looked to have a really big role in the defense. He had the big interception in the end zone of Bo Nix in week 2 against Denver. And then he got hurt again, and that took him out of action for a little bit. So yeah, the durability thing is a real issue when talking about Corey Trice, but maybe they take a big swing. Maybe they go for a DJ Reed or a Charvarius Ward in free agency. Maybe they draft a guy in the early stages of the draft, but they do have to get somebody, because the defensive backfield was a mess in the final stretch of the year. It's a big reason why they lost 5 straight games to end the year, where there was constant miscommunications. The nickel spot was very up in the air. Beanie Bishop started the year as the nickel, and then when Cam Sutton served out his suspension and came back, they put Cam Sutton there, and Cam Sutton didn't play well. So all things to consider when talking about the cornerback spot for Pittsburgh is, all right, what are they going to do at nickel, and what are they going to do for a starter on the boundary opposite of Joey Porter Jr., because Dante Jackson, not going to be that guy. And if Corey Trice, and his durability issues are as big an issue as Omar Khan lets on, then those are things that they have to at least discuss in-house and figure out, okay, are we going to go try to take a big swing on a Carlton Davis, a DJ Reed, a Charvarius Ward? Are we going to try to maybe trade for a guy? Nate Hobbs perhaps could be a name to keep an eye out for. There's going to be plenty of options both on the open market and maybe via trade if you can go that route to get somebody. But they need somebody else opposite of Joey Porter Jr. And look, even Joey Porter Jr., I mean, he had spells last year where he wasn't good. There was a lot of stretch down the year where he was getting a ton of penalties for being too grabby. Not to say that he's not a good player. Obviously he is, but those are things that they also have to address. So cornerback position will be a big focus for them this coming offseason. Intrigued to see what they do at safety, as, looking for a third option. I don't think Minkah Fitzpatrick's going anywhere, and obviously Deshaun Elliott played incredible in his first year as a Steeler. But in terms of finding that third piece at safety, if they want to upgrade from a guy like, DeMonte Casey at that spot. So those are the biggest takeaways from me in terms of Omar Khan's press conference. Like I said, if you are not already subscribed to the channel, please make sure to do that. We'll be back later on after Brandon Beane's press conference to talk a little bit Buffalo Bills. But in terms of Steelers fans, Black and Gold Breakdown, multiple episodes per week. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. And we'll be back later on with more content from the NFL Combine live from Indianapolis. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.